Good morning everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's mixed media piece, I am actually going to be working on some paper and I'm pulling out some of these old gel prints that I have around. My idea for today is to just use what I already have without printing anything new. So I'm going to see what I can come up with here. I am just working on a piece of mixed media paper and I have that taped down to my work surface there just with some painter's tape, and I'm starting out with a little bit of Naples yellow, which I'm using the brayer to apply. Here I'm going in with a little bit of the golden fluid acrylic Mars Black. I really like the way these fluid acrylics work. Add a little bit of water to them and they do all sorts of interesting things. Today I'm just spraying a little bit of water and just moving some of the paint around with a brush for right now. I'm removing a little bit of it with some paper towels there, which is doing two things. It's removing some of the paint, plus it's redepositing it in other areas. Now I am going into this with absolutely zero plan, even less than usual, and I am an intuitive artist, which means I basically kind of just start working and see what happens. This, I don't have any plan at all. I just grabbed some papers and some paints and I just started, and I'm going to see what happens, and I don't know, you'll see it as I see it progressing on the screen here. That's a little bit of the Winsor & Newton Pale Olive that I put down there, and I added that wet so some of it blended in with the other colors. Okay, that sheet, if you've watched some of my other videos on the ransom note letter printing, that is the pickup sheet for some of those letters that I printed, and I like the way it looked, and I have that picked up on a book page there, and I saved it to use at some point in the future, and today was the day. I saw it and it kind of spoke to me, so I just grabbed it, tore a section off and glued it down. What I'm using for adhesive here is my, I believe that's the Artist Loft brand of the matte gel medium. That's what I prefer to use for an adhesive because it doesn't have any sort of gloss finish or anything on it. It's a matte medium. That way I can choose at the end if I want to spray it with something glossy or not. But it works really well for me in that manner. That is another one of those pickup sheets from the ransom note letter printing. That one is on tissue paper though, and I really like to make my gel prints on tissue paper because when you lay it down, as you can see there, the tissue basically just disappears into the background, so you can get some nice through images. Like, you can't really tell here because it's a little far away, but you can see what I have underneath there on that original paint that I put down through those little squares on that black sheet, and it just adds another element of depth, which is something that I like to work with, depth and layering in my pieces. Okay, this round thing is not actually a print of the moon. If you watched my video maybe about a month ago, I was attempting to make a homemade gel plate, and I used a round cake pan, and I had questionable results on it, but it did make these nice like lunar looking prints, and I thought, okay, well I can definitely use that in the future as well. And again, when I was going through all of my old prints, I saw that and thought, oh, maybe I can do something with this today. So that was also pulled on a piece of tissue paper, and as you can see all of the green and black and yellow underneath kind of coming through, so it's a very transparent look, and I really love that. So I'm just going through with some more of these pull sheets from the lettering and just kind of placing them around. Not worrying too much about composition at this point, but I'm starting to play with the idea of balance. So I have a large dark object at the bottom left, so I wanted to balance that out with something darker up at the top. So what I just showed you there, it's kind of hard to see right now, but you'll be able to see it when I zoom in a little bit. This is actually magazine text that I printed on with white acrylic paint on tissue paper. It is almost completely transparent, but up close you can see all of the text. You can actually see it close enough to read some of the words. Now, when I do magazine image transfer for the purpose of gel printing, my goal is never to be able to read the words. I love the idea of using text in my art, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and I'll be showing you two of them here today, and these are two that I use quite frequently. But I just want the idea of text, the idea of written language, and this is a great way to get it. All right, so I'm mixing up a color here. This is a little bit of turquoise, some Winsor Blue from Winsor & Newton. I put a little bit of Artist's Loft green gold and just a touch of titanium white in there to make a bluish greenish kind of more intense teal color. I wanted something a little brighter because the background is very subdued. There's all of the pale olive and the Naples yellow, and then you've got the varying shades of black, and I believe I printed that lunar looking circle in Payne's Gray. But I needed something with a little pop of color. And I didn't want to stray too far from the color palette that I was already using, so that teal plays very nicely with all of those other colors that I have going on there. So I outlined the bottom of the large circle with some of the teal, and I'm just using my color shaper for that. This is my 1-inch color shaper. And I'm going in and just basically making lines with the very fine end of the color shaper here, and I'm varying the length of them. The thickness is all staying the same because obviously I'm using the same tool, but I'm varying the length, and I'm going up around on the left hand side there and making some more of these marks. This is a mark and a pattern of marks that I use in a lot of my work. So for me as an abstract artist, it's important to me that I have like elements to my body of work. So when you look at all of my work, you can definitely see, okay, this was made by the same artist. And that's something that I personally choose to focus on in my work. It does not have to be that way, but for me, I think it's an important element to my body of work. So if you look through some of my things in the past, you'll be able to see some of these similar marks. And I have a few different little, I don't want to call them tricks, but a few different little things that I add to my work that is consistent enough to be identifiable. All right, I'm just balancing out the color a bit there by adding some of that blue around the rest of the circle. And I'm blending it in pretty well. I added a little water to it so that it actually became more transparent, almost like a watercolor. Because I just want the idea of it there in the background. I don't want a big blob of blue, but I did want a little bit of that to come up around the top there just to make the rest of it make a little more visual sense. My plan at this point, once this dries, is to go in with probably a charcoal pencil and get some darkness around the outer perimeter of the circle. And I'm going to do that in a moment here after I add some of that white printed text that I was talking about. I really love the way those sheets turned out, and I will definitely be doing that again. There's just something so beautiful about the white and the text together. Okay, so you can actually kind of see the text now a little bit under my left hand there and my right hand now. But you'll be able to see it even more when I show you the piece up close. I'm going in just with a charcoal pencil and I'm smudging as I go. I don't want it to be a hard line. I want it to be softer and kind of just almost shaded. I'm going in and shading a little bit of that to make it a little rounder looking at the bottom, which is where I want to have most of the visual weight. That's the orientation that I'm going to be displaying the piece in as you're looking at it right there. So I want the visual weight to remain mostly at the bottom. I'm taking a piece of very soft, very black charcoal. I'm not sure where I got that. I want to say Michael's, but I've had that since I was in college, so it's been hanging around for a little while. But it's nice. It's very, very soft and very, very dark. It can get messy pretty quickly, so you'll see here in a minute I'm going to end up putting a paper towel down so that I don't smudge everything. Although with the charcoal, if you do get a few smudges, which I did on this piece because it's almost impossible to work with charcoal and not get smudges somewhere, you can go in with a kneaded eraser and just kind of clean it up. It'll do a pretty good job of taking care of any mess that you might make with that. Also important when you're done using the charcoal, and this might seem obvious, but wash your hands right away because the stuff, it will smudge and you will just leave dirty looking fingerprints on your piece. And unless that's an element that you're going for, and maybe it is, that's cool. But if it's not, you're going to definitely want to take care of that. That was just a white Conti pencil that I was using there, by the way, in that last part. Okay, this is the second way that I'm adding text to this piece. I chose the word deviant, and I did magazine image transfer with these letters, and this is what I was referring to with my ransom note style lettering, and I've been doing this in a lot of my pieces. It's another element that carries through my body of work, so you can easily identify that as, you know, one of my pieces when that is in there. If you are interested in seeing the process of how I do that, I will link that video as well at the end screen for you, and you can take a look. I didn't bother putting it in here because I've done it in a few other videos and I don't like to be too redundant. Okay, so I typically do these letters printed in black ink so that you can really see them, but I wanted a little bit more of the white. Since I had the white text in the other piece, I thought I would stick with the white just to carry that over and make it a little more balanced and make a little more visual sense. But you know, white doesn't necessarily show up that well, so I'm going through with my Posca pen. I used a gel pen at first, but it really wasn't doing the job for me. So I've got my acrylic paint marker there, my Posca pen, and I went over and just solidified some of the letters where you couldn't really read them. And it still wasn't exactly where I wanted it, so I'm taking a micron pen here, and not a full outline in all of them, kind of like a spotty outline, to make it look a little more like a gel print would, because you know how you don't get necessarily perfect transfers on there. So I wasn't looking for 100% perfect. I just wanted it to be outlined just a bit so that it stood out enough that it was going to grab you, and that would be a thing that you noticed when you looked at the piece right away. So while I had the micron out, there were a few areas that I wanted to highlight a bit. So I'm going around, adding a few more of those lines on the inside of the sphere because I think it carried over nicely, and it just was missing a little bit of something. And there was all of that fine line work on the outside, and I just wanted a little bit of it there on the inside, not a whole lot, just enough to carry it through a bit. And then I decided I wanted to embellish the squares that the letters were printed on a bit too. So I went in and did like a messy sketch on them. And by that I just mean I held the pen loosely and I wasn't trying to draw perfect lines. I just wanted to get like a rough and sketchy look added to the squares themselves. Not the letters inside, but just the squares. And you can see as I'm doing it right there. This adds a little bit of shadow, I guess, shading like automatically just by the way that I'm doing it. I am purposefully adding a lot of it on one side and not a lot on the other. And then I'm just going through and adding a little more of the line work here and there. There were a couple places on the white that I wanted outlined just a little bit, almost to create a shadow like I'm doing in that upper corner there and down in that lower corner that I was just working on. The paper kind of naturally curved in there, so I shaded it a tiny bit with my pen just to further push that imperfection of the tear that I made when I ripped that piece off. And I'm extending some of those lines up because I realized that I had a whole lot of the lines on the bottom and on the side, but really not that many on the top, and I wanted it to be a little more congruous there in that manner. I'm going to be displaying this piece because it is on paper under glass, and I have a few frames that I have picked up at thrift stores along the way, and there it is. This is a great thing to do. I will often go thrifting and buy really cheap frames and refinish them in a way that I like, that is going to complement my work. I typically spray paint them in black, but I mean, you can do whatever you want. If you have a piece that you think a color might look better, that's always an option for you. But there's my finished piece for you. That is going to be up for sale in my Etsy shop as soon as I can come up with a title for it. That's always the hard part. But thank you everyone for joining me again today, and thank you to everyone who has subscribed this week. Again, another great week for subscribers. If you haven't had a chance yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to click the bell notification and you'll know exactly when I put out all of my videos. And if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. Take care everybody, and see you next week.